Member for Laventille West.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for your recognizing me to make my contribution to this debate on, well, the report on the Finance Committee, Standing Finance Committee. Madam Speaker, as has been indicated earlier, we are talking about supplementary funding for the government's program in the sum of $3.081 billion. This figure, just for the benefit of the citizens of the Republic, consists of personal expenditure in the tune of 51 million, goods and services 620 plus million, minor equipment purchases, current transfers and subsidies, current transfers to statutory boards and similar bodies, and the development program. Madam Speaker, it is to be noted when you look at these figures and the amounts that they carry or represent, some 2/3 of that amount, more than 2 billion of this, is, Madam Speaker, salaries and emoluments, payment for NIS, and that kind of thing, meaning it eventually gets into the private domain of agents, employees of the state. Minister Gonzalez, the member for Lopino Bonnier West, in his contribution made a very potent comment that it appears as though the issue is not about money, but rather it is about management. I agree with that to some extent. I go further to say the issue is really about work. It's about productivity. I hold the view, and I'm becoming more and more convinced. As we increase the expenditure for the government's program to the tune of $3.081 billion, Madam Speaker, if we would get optimal value for the money, at least those parts that go towards salaries and emoluments, the economy, the economist tells me, would immediately grow by about 20 to 25%. And therefore, I consider, as the Member of Parliament for Laventille West, I consider that productivity and work is where it's at. We will immediately solve a lot of the problems that we face and you hear our friends and others complain about if only we would ensure that the Minister of Finance gets value for money in that regard. I just want to make the point to the member for Couva South, because towards the end of his presentation, he did accuse the member for Lopino Bonnier West of misleading this House and misleading him. And he spoke about the way the money that is allocated in this supplementary allocation for the Ministry of Public Utilities, particularly through TNTech, he almost accused him of misleading us. I want to say to my friend that the bulk of the money, $68 million, is for the Ministry of Public Utilities to pay TNTech for the electricity that it accounts for in terms of lighting all the public facilities, the public grounds around the country. My friend got it wrong. The Ministry of Public Utilities is not responsible. And this is why I believe the member for Dago Martin West was quite right. Many of our colleagues over there, they probably don't read these documents. And where they read them, they have a pascha for misleading the country, even in the face of the truth and the facts. So I want to correct him publicly to say, when it comes to the maintenance and the repairs and the improvements of these facilities, that is the responsibility of the regional corporations. All that the Ministry of Public Utilities would do is to pay TNTech for the electricity consumed. So once my friend gets clear on that, I think he might be off to a better start. Madam Speaker, the member for Siparia did ask in her usual I would say, extravagant, populist way. What all you're doing with all that money? You already had a billion, you had a 50 plus or 50, about $50 billion budget, and now you are asking for another $3 billion. That was what she said. And want to know what we are doing with that money. I would like, for the benefit of the listeners in this country, and there are some who would be easily misled by the member for Siparia and her grandiose publicity stunts, that the monies are to be spent at least in national security, head 22, which is what I'll deal with. Some of it goes to the General Administration of National Security, the 4 formations of the Trinidad and Tobago Defense Force, the Prison Service, the Fire Service, the Strategic Services Agency, the Transit Unit. They are responsible for the transport hubs around the city and the priority bus route and a couple other locations under their purview. The Forensic Science Center, the Probation Service, which is now within the purview of the Ministry of National Security, and of course the Immigration Division. And I think I did say the Fire Service as well. And the services that are going to be accounted for, paid for, services already in many cases utilized, and projections to year end would be janitorial services, salaries and cost of living allowance, overtime payments, allowances of all descriptions, from plainclothes allowances for the police, duty allowance, meal allowances for everyone, housing allowance where appropriate, proficiency allowances, protective suits allowances for the fire service in particular, maintenance of vehicles, traveling allowance, maintenance allowance. Madam Speaker, NIS payments, increments, acting allowances, electricity, telephone use, security services, vehicle maintenance, and as my friend from Couva South pointed out, gratuities, where there are contract workers. At the end of their contract periods, they are entitled to gratuity payments. And these allocations, the allocation to the ministry, the supplemental funding to the Ministry of National Security is to ensure that we can cover all of these adequately. And again, reinforcing the point that the large majority, perhaps as far as 75% of this increased funding, treats with the personnel working in the ministry. Much less is spent on the development program. And therefore, I reiterate, in my view, it is critical that Trinidad and Tobago, for the sake of this economy, and those who operate in national security, and indeed in every government department and agency, if we strive to operate optimally, the economy would grow, we'll resolve some of the bugbears we face, and all would be a lot better off. We'll even feel better about ourselves. Because as the Quran says, to work is to pray. And even in Christianity, we observe that God, they taught us, created this world, he spent 6 days working and then rested on the 7th. Some people want to work 1 day and rest for 6. That is ungodly, I might want to add. Madam Speaker, the member for Couva South made passing commentary on the question of pension payments. And I simply want to say, and he accused the Minister of Finance of not caring for those who must benefit from that. But I want him to know it was this Minister of Finance, within recent times, who made an arrangement, which is now in vogue, for the payment of $3,000 to persons upon their departure from the office, pending the final calculation of and payment of their pensions, just to make sure in the intervening period they are not discomforted or discommoded, as happened previously for many years. You couldn't get more caring than that. And while I am at it, I, Fitzgerald Ethelbert Hinds, the Member of Parliament for Laventille West, I want to say openly and proudly, I am absolutely proud at the work and the contribution of the Minister of Finance as he has done over the last 7 years in this country. It has not been easy, and I have watched very closely all of the budgets, all of the supplementary fundings, all of the things. I've watched in the cabinet the way he's had to manage this, and the Prime Minister is right. Rather than condemn and criticize him, you may challenge things he do. You may have a different view. You may be Mr. Economist from UE or otherwise. You may be Mr. UNC or Madam UNC, Madam SIS for all you know. But Madam Speaker, you cannot avoid and evade the fact that the Minister of Finance had stood as a stalwart in this country and steered us through the most difficult times. And that's one of the many reasons why I am so proud to be PNM. The Prime Minister, the member for Dago Martin West, addressed this Parliament in this debate earlier, and he achieved two things. The most important one for me is that he demonstrated that we are the PNM. We have a way in which we do business. We are not the UNC. We are not like the UNC. We don't want to be like the UNC. Our record is a proud record. And the other thing he demonstrated, Madam Speaker, is that in every respect, be it intellectually, be it historically, be it morally, in every respect, we are superior to our political opponents in this House. And that's the reason why this country, as the member for Princetown correctly pointed out, has chosen us to run the affairs of this country for more than 78% of the life of this country as an independent nation state. It's because of our record. And for the last few weeks, when it was spyware, and the member for Siparia raised it, I'll come back to that, and all of the machinations and all of the things they have been doing in the national community, it is designed to give the impression that we are like them. We are all from the same, I have a metaphor for it, but they find it offensive. We are all alligators. That's what they want to sell. But we are not. We are the PNM. We're not like you. And we don't like your ways. Madam Speaker, and in all you have heard, Madam Speaker, in all you have heard all day today since we started at 1:30, the one thing you have not heard, the citizens of this country have not heard, is that any one of our colleagues accuse anybody on this side of interfering dishonestly with public money. Not one. And they can't say that with a straight face. Not in 7 years. The Minister of Finance told us in his presentation that we are now operating at 50% of our overdraft. We got up to 90-something% during these tough times when we kept the ship of state sailing on, paying every single one of the 90,000 public servants full salary on time. During those COVID years, those brutal years. And it was refreshing for me to know on behalf of the people of Laventille West that we have brought the thing down to 50% of the overdraft. When he came to office, he reminded us today, the Minister of Finance, when we came to office, he was told gleefully by the then outgoing governor of the central bank, you have 3 days to do it, 3 days to survive. And when he said that, I imagined the member for Siparia in the background. And forgive me if I imagined that, because they didn't wish this country well. They are not prepared to live here and work here once the PNM is in power. They have problems with that. And I have evidence and feeling that she was somewhere in the back. The member was somewhere in the background. I'm sorry. The member was somewhere in the background because it wasn't long after that former governor appeared here as a senator in this parliament on the invitation of the member for Siparia. But that's another matter. Our debt to GDP, 72%. At one time, it was 94%. When we were struggling to keep this thing going, to pay even the salaries on our friends on the other side, to keep the school system going, even though it was online, to keep the hospitals going, challenged as they were with a parallel health system. We have every reason to commemorate and to celebrate the Minister of Finance. Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I spoke recently in this House, and I raised the question, having been accused by one of my friends on the other side, the member for St. Augustine it was, accused the government of delaying that report that the member for Tobago East laid in this House that was made reference to throughout this day. So I'm just passing through it. Not going to tarry on it. The member for St. Augustine said 5 months. Well, you know what? As you heard earlier, Madam Speaker, in 1997, they had a similar report dealing with the same issue. Today is 25 years later. We still have not seen it. And they had the gall and the temerity to criticize us, say we held it up for 5 months. That is what our friends on the other side do. 2 generations and a quarter since 1997. And as you would have heard earlier today, even the chairman of the last committee that this cabinet put in place to look at the report and, well, to investigate the situation could not get a copy of it. I am advised, Madam Speaker, that the failure of those who failed to have reported to the police, because these days they're telling me I should report an incident that I made public to the police. And there are some matters that I have reported to the police. They don't want to hear about that. About the 9 deeds that were purchased by a young man close to the then government. Anyway, Madam Speaker, the law, Section 24 of Act 27 of 1986, dealing with sexual offenses, makes it a mandatory requirement to report any knowledge of that kind of activity. And I'm sure that the lawyers and those relevant stakeholders are now looking at this matter to see whether persons were guilty of a breach of the law, having buried it to the point where there was no public record that Chairman Jones, who led that investigative team, could have even found as a backdrop to the work that they had to do now. And so, the likes of, and recently, Madam Speaker, I mentioned in this House a matter that irritated some tremendously to the point of threat of legal action. But I speak in this House. That committee was led by a certain Mr. Sabga. And among them was a national pontificator called...
Okay, so I just remind you that you promised me you won't tarry on the report. Okay, so...
Yes.
Yes, please.
But just to move on from it, the likes of Diana Mahabir Wyatt, I would like to hear her on this matter 25 years later. Chief pontificator, Madam Speaker. But Madam Speaker, I wouldn't tarry as I told you. Some of this allocation is for the prison service to deal with issues, as I told you, about 75% for the personnel, officers of the prison service and contract workers there. They are the ones who are responsible, Madam Speaker, for upholding the security and the safety of the inmates in the prison and the officers and visitors and what have you, and protecting the society from spillovers in that prison. And I'm pleased to say that I look forward to actualizing the allocations as described by the Minister of Finance here for the prison service, because they have a critical job to do in the context of national security and have been doing it. I want to encourage the officers, as they receive improved remuneration and the allowances that this portends, that they continue, because recently, they have stepped up. Imagine within recent times, they had 291 searches at the prison since the new acting commissioner came to office. I can tell you, I've been leading national security now for the past year, and we've always had reports of searches in the prison, but that activity has stepped up, 291 within recent times, yielding some 14,000 grams of marijuana, 223 cell phones, 9,159 cigarettes. And while you may think that that is a destructive element that will generate cancer, it is not only that, Madam Speaker. Inside of that place, a cigarette sells for as much as $200. Recently, 2 prison officers are now under investigation, one having been seen from the allegations and from evidence available so far, with as much as 3,500 cigarettes in one package, That is worth in the prison over $525,000 if they are sold at $150 each. And I might tell you, Madam Speaker, those cell phones and those SIM cards and the knives is cell phone chargers, SIM card, phone batteries, improvised weapons, USB cables, and all of these things have very devious portents inside of that institution. A lot of calls are made, and a lot from what the Commissioner of Police reports, a lot of hits are called from inside of the prison. So they are to be very encouraged. So every cent of this allocation that goes to improving the circumstances of the individual officers, meeting their expectations in accordance with the terms and conditions of their service, is very, very, very important. And I urge the prison service to continue, as the government does its part, as the Minister of Finance does his part, in terms of finding the money with an improved allocation in this so-called midterm review. It is incumbent on you, Mr. Prison Officer, to say thanks by extending yourself productively and otherwise, as you have been doing. And there's always room for improvement in the protection of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Similarly, we understand, Madam Speaker, and all my colleagues will know, that the Forensic Science Center within the Ministry of National Security is also a part of an integral part of the criminal justice system. Here's where autopsies are done and the cause of death would be revealed. And we are having a tremendous amount of attacks on women, even on children. Murders in the country. There was a time you get up Monday morning a few years ago, and you would hear bodies are backed up in the Forensic Science Center and they can't cope. And then the next thing you will hear is the forensic pathologist at that time, some years ago, he gone on strike because it was time to negotiate an improvement in his contract terms. So he goes on a go slow and the thing backs up and we had a problem. Those things you hear no more. And the allocations, the increased funding includes the Forensic Science Center to pay gratuities and to pay allowances to those who work in that important state agency. And I'm equally pleased to have you know, with all of that, I think Easter weekend we had 15 murders. Those are the unfortunate facts. Allowances to be paid to these people so that they will continue doing their stuff as an important part of the criminal justice system. We have employed within recent times 2 pathologists and another 2. So we have 2 in service now, and as I speak to you, Madam Speaker, another pathologist is being processed. We expect that he will get on the job very, very soon. Madam Speaker, no backlog in daily cases. And today with the COVID circumstance around us, everybody that comes to the Forensic Science Center has to first be tested for COVID. That takes an extra day or sometimes 2. Until you get the results back and you know, well, it's not COVID positive, then the pathologist is able to do his work. Very constrained circumstances. COVID changed everything. And even in that, we have improved the performance of the Forensic Science Center, because when I went there a year ago, I decided I will continue the good work done by the member for St. Anne's East. And so it has gone on, Madam Speaker. No backlog and all that. We employed an additional 2 more 3 attendants, taking us to a total of 7, just
Speaker,
to ensure that the work continues.
Standing Order 48-1 and 87-2, please.
Please continue.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. These obtrusive friends of ours on the other side, they don't want to hear good news. They want to, I mean, as you heard earlier today. Anyway, Madam Speaker, let me continue. Madam Speaker, part of this improved allocation will deal with immigration, officers of the Immigration Service, some of whom serve at the heliport facility. That's a immigration center where they assess. And then we have the counter-trafficking unit of the Ministry of National Security that screens every single person that comes to the attention of national security for trafficking indicators. And both of these will benefit from this improved funding. Today there was a story in the paper, or yesterday it was, a long story about goings-ons at the heliport. I, as Minister of National Security, took the trouble to make contact with the counter-trafficking unit and the Special Investigation Task Force of the Police Service that works in collaboration with the counter-trafficking unit. And this morning I conducted a meeting with the ambassador, the new ambassador of Venezuela to Trinidad and Tobago, His Excellency. And between the Venezuelan ambassador, the counter-trafficking unit, and the Special Investigations Task Force, not a single one, including the Venezuelan representative here, could bear support for any of the allegations made in that newspaper report. None. And in fact, the police told me, Madam Speaker, those who will benefit from these allocations and who we must make available what they are entitled to. They told me, Madam Speaker, that having heard of this, they went and interviewed some of the persons at that center in the heliport, and there was no confirmation of it.
Okay, so, member, I'll ask you to come back now to your allocations. Okay?
Thank you very much. And Madam Speaker, questions were raised about $66 million for the Strategic Services Agency by the member for Siparia. And the member for Siparia raised this question about the member for Barataria San Juan asking here about if some of this allocation is for spyware. I thought we were past that. Because I had to tell this house, and I had to say to this country outside of this house, that just to use the word spy, Madam Speaker, implied and implies that something unlawful is going on. But we have an Interception of Communications Act. And as the government indicated, the policy of this government in relation to the SSA is all that kind of capability rests with the SSA. And it is all done in accordance with the law. So when the member for Siparia raised that question today, I said how disingenuous the member is. And shameless too. Shameless. Because the member knows the facts and continue to mouth it very wickedly and immaturely and recklessly, Madam Speaker, casting aspersions on those people who we pay in this country to protect us from terrorists and murderers and waylayers and rapists and human traffickers. But as I said, there are some people who like good and some people who don't want nothing good. So, Madam Speaker, I give my friends the assurance on the other side. We comply with the law, and I've invited the member for Siparia who raised this matter. If you do not want to accept what I say, put on your self-issued silk and go to the Hall of Justice and demonstrate that somebody's rights are being infringed. Madam Speaker, so these allocations are to take care of outstanding NIS payments and monies due and owing to personnel, and as I indicated, to acquire 3 standby generators and a small part of it to upgrade the CCTV camera system at Piaco. And as I say so, the member for Siparia bold-facedly today raised the question of about CCTV cameras. One of the first things the member for Siparia did when she came to office is to disable all of the facial recognition cameras and the system at Piaco Airport. In addition to that, remove every camera from around the Prime Minister's house or residence. Ask the head of the security agencies that time if the blimp could see through galvanized and wall, all sounding like somebody who have something to hide. And went on to do worse. So let me put it and make it abundantly clear. The SSA is an establishment set up under the laws of Trinidad and Tobago, and they comply with those laws. And I ask my friends on the other side to stop rumor mongering. I heard someone today raise the question of gender-based violence and what is happening. And I just want to say, we have gender-based violence, the child protection unit and the gender-based violence units across the police service. They actually have locations at the Sinclair Police Station, the Maloney Police Station, the Besor Street Police Station, the Sangre Grande Police Station, the Carenage Police Station, Chaguanas, Gasparillo, Labre.
I rise on 48.1. I fail to see the line item that the direction in which he's going about gender-based violence, wherever.
Member, I'm sure you've been here for most of the debate, and my recollection is the member for Princess Tong raised those issues, and the member said, he prefaced his statement in saying he heard somebody mention, so it's in direct response to that. I'm sure you were here at that time, because you've been here most of the day. I have to give you that. I have to give you that credit. You've been here most of the day.
Yes, yes. I see, Madam Speaker. I thank you very much, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, these units are up and functional and doing what they must in Trinidad and Tobago. They have easily accessible on our website at National Security and on the police website all of the telephone numbers that a victim or a person can call to get their support 24 hours per day. The National Domestic Violence Hotline 800-SAVE or 800-7283, that is operational all of the time. This morning, we tested it. I called the minister responsible and raised the issue, and the minister continues to monitor this to ensure that the people of Trinidad and Tobago who need the support of those who we improve their circumstances with this increased allocation today, Madam Speaker. And when we were in committee, and this is a debate on the report of the committee, I heard my friend who jumps up like a wooden toy.
Member, let's limit personal reflections, all right, that may appear to be insulting. All right, please.
My friend from Naparima who likes to jump up at the drop of a hat. My friend told us in committee, and it's recorded in Hansard, that we are about to spend all these millions on the SSA and would not spend equally on the cadet force. So I want, before I close, to let my friend from Naparima understand that the cadet force is one youth program in the Ministry of National Security. One. And it got an allocation of some $4 million for this fiscal year. And that's because for the last 2 years, the COVID experience put pay to all of their activity, most of which is outdoors and in groups. And it is only within recent times, and including as late as Saturday, I attended a function of the cadet force. I attended the opening of their first camp about 5 weeks ago in San Fernando to train non-commissioned officers, NCOs, and NCO cadres, they call it, in preparation for promotion. And another one is expected to start in the month of July, Madam Speaker. And that's only one program. So it is just facetious to say you're spending money on the SSA as though that is not necessary. Every bit of the expenditure in national security is necessary. And you comparing it with the cadet force. I mean, how banal. And I want to say to my friend in passing that we have dedicated a whole Ministry of Youth Development and National Service to the youth. And even in national security, when we recruit 238 officers for the prison service, 540-something officers for the defense force, as we did in the last year, for the fire service, for the police service, it is young people we recruit. They must be between the ages of 18 and 25 years. So all of the people who we recruit and train and put to work in the service of this country, they are as well young people. And the Trinidad and Tobago Coast Guard, who we are funding today as well, they carry on some swimming pool training programs for young people in Maloney, in Coconut Drive in Mova, and Sogrin Trace in my constituency. And it's not only about swimming, it is about discipline, it is about conducting oneself in a certain way, building self-esteem, teaching how to operate and to live in harmony with each other. In some cases, the officers become almost like parents to these children. So, Madam Speaker, I just wanted to say that in passing so that my friend from Naparima would better understand. So I look forward to the realization of this. And I'm very pleased that the Ministry of National Security, having made the request we did, are to benefit from this supplemental funding, and I give the national community the assurance that I will continue as the Minister of National Security to provide these resources. Go to the cabinet, argue for them where we have to. Provide these resources to all of the agencies of national security. And we're not just talking it today with this additional allocation. We are demonstrating that, and this is in addition to what we had already done. Making good our obligations to the personnel and doing the business so that they could do the work that they are sworn and paid to do. So, Madam Speaker, I would like to ask my friends on the other side, as my colleague from Lopino Bonnier West did, encourage them to be a lot more patriotic in their orientation, to take a more sanguine view on the affairs of the country, and to be bold enough from sometime to admit, as everyone else in the country knows, that this country is in safer and better hands with this government and with the PNM. Acknowledge that, support these measures, and we will use these monies without tampering with public funds, as has been the case in the past, some of which keeps the police very busy now. As for my friend, the member for Oropuch, my friend from Lopino Bonnier West did correctly ask him, and I want to conclude by asking him, not to take every opportunity to play around with the serious business of policing and law and order in this country, and not to be so curious and jiggery. The police have a job to do. I heard him recently call what we do and what we are allocating these resources for witch hunting. And I want to conclude by saying, when the police are on the prowl and they have their work to do, they don't see yellow or red. They see crime, criminal conduct. And if they see a crime and the perpetrator happens to be a politician, it ought to make no difference. So join us in supporting them, Madam Speaker, so that they can do their work in the protection and the safety of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. I thank you.
Member for Barataria, stand on.
Thank you very much.